Many may not know, but Iran is very hard at work changing the balance of power within the Middle East. No, they're not overtly threatening war against unstable Middle East governments, but are in a covert propaganda war against key regimes. The Iranians, who understand the weakness of their military's logistics and air power, are pursuing a strategy of indirect approach. They are laying the foundation for power based on a perception of greater Iranian power and declining American and Saudi power. Bahrain is the perfect example and test case. An island off the coast of Saudi Arabia, Bahrain and Saudi Arabia are linked by a causeway. For most purposes, Bahrain is part of Saudi Arabia. Unlike Saudi Arabia, it is not a major oil producer, but it is a banking center. It is also the home of the U.S. Fifth Fleet and has close ties to the United States. The majority of its population is Shia, but its government is Sunni and heavily linked to Saudi Arabia. The Shiite population has not fared as well economically as Shia in other countries in the region, and tensions between the government and the public have long existed. The toppling of the government of Bahrain by a Shiite movement would potentially embolden Shia in Saudi Arabia, who live primarily in the oil-rich northeast near Bahrain. It also would weaken the U.S. military posture in the region, and it would demonstrate Iranian power. If the Saudis intervened in Bahrain, the Iranians would have to have grounds to justify their own intervention, covert or overt. Iran might also use any violent Bahrainian government suppression of demonstrators to justify more open intervention. In the meantime, the United States, which has about 1,500 military personnel plus embassy staff on the ground in Bahrain, would face the choice of reinforcing or pulling its troops out. Unlike Libya, where the efforts are primarily internal, the events in Bahrain clearly involve Saudi, Iranian, and U.S. interests. Bahrain is also the point where the Iranians have their best chance, since it is both the most heavily Shiite nation and one where the Shiites have the most grievances. But the Iranians have other targets as well, which might be defined as any area adjoining Saudi Arabia with a substantial Shiite population and with American bases. This would include Oman, which the United States uses as a support facility, Qatar, headquarters of the U.S. Central Command and home to Al Idif Air Base, and Kuwait, the key logistics hub for Iraqi operations and with major arms support, storage, and port facilities. All three have experienced or are experiencing demonstrations. Logically, these are Iran's first targets. The largest target of all is, of course, Saudi Arabia. That is the heart of the Arabian Peninsula, and its destabilization would change the regional balance of power and the way the world works. Iran has never made a secret of its animosity toward Saudi Arabia, nor vice versa. Saudi Arabia could now be in a vice. There is a massive instability in Yemen, with potential to spill over into Saudi Arabia's southern Somali concentrated areas. The situation in Iraq is moving in the Iranians' favor as well. Successful regime changes in even one or two of the countries on the littoral of the Persian Gulf could generate massive internal fears regardless of what the Saudi Shia did, and could lead to a dissension in the royal family. It is not surprising, therefore, that the Saudis are moving aggressively against any sign of unrest among the Shia, arresting dozens who have indicated dissent. The Iranians would be delighted to cause regime change throughout the region, but that is not likely to occur, at least not everywhere in the region. They would be equally happy simply to cause massive instability in the region, however. With the United States withdrawing from Iraq, the Saudis represent the major supporter of Iraq's Sunnis. With the Saudis diverted, this would ease the way for Iranian influence in Iraq. At that point, there would be three options: Turkey intervening broadly, something it is not eager to do; the United States reversing course and surging troops into the region to support tottering regimes, something for which there is no political appetite in the United States; and the United States accepting the changed regional balance of power, which I figure that's probably the direction they will go. Two processes are underway. The first is that Iran will be the single outside power with the most influence in Iraq, not limited and not unchallenged, but certainly the greatest. The second is that as the United States withdraws, Iran will be in a position to pursue its interests more decisively. Those interests, divided into three parts, are: 1. Eliminating foreign powers from the region to maximize Iranian power; 2. Convincing Saudi Arabia and other countries in the region that they must reach an accommodation with Iran or face potentially dangerous consequences; and 3. A redefinition of the economics of oil in the Persian Gulf in favor of Iran, including Iranian participation in oil projects in other Persian Gulf countries and regional investment in Iran energy development. The Iranians are in a powerful position whatever happens, given the U.S. withdrawal from Iraq. Combine this with a series of regime changes, or simply destabilization on the border of Saudi Arabia, and two things happen. First, the Saudi regime would be in trouble and would have to negotiate some agreement with the Iranians, and not an agreement the Saudis would like. Second, the U.S. basing position in the Persian Gulf would massively destabilize, making the U.S. intervention in the region even more difficult. The problem created by the U.S. leaving Iraq without having been able to install a strong pro-American government remains the core issue. The instability in the Persian Gulf allows the Iranians a low-risk, high-reward parallel strategy that, if it works, could unhinge the balance of power in the entire region. The threat of an uprising in Iran appears minimal, with the Iranian government having no real difficulty crushing resistance. The resistance on the western shore of the Persian Gulf may be crushed or dissolved as well, in which case Iran would still retain its advantageous position in Iraq. But if the perfect storm presents itself, with Iran increasing its influence in Iraq and massive destabilization on the Arabian Peninsula, then the United States will face some extraordinarily difficult and dangerous choices, beginning with the question of how to resist Iran while keeping the price of oil manageable. This scenario plays right into the hands of Bible prophecy. With the U.S. leaving Iraq, Iran looks to covertly bully its way into Iraq, the nations of the Saudi Arabian Peninsula, and other key countries that are teetering on the verge of collapse. This without investing Iranian troops or direct confrontation. Iran knows that the U.S. public has no appetite to engage in another war, and will likely allow Iran to permeate its influence throughout the region in fear of upsetting the stability of oil prices. As long as any influence peddling Iran may do in the region does not upset the price of oil, I believe the U.S. would be willing to consider it as part of the cost of doing business in the region. I really see U.S. influence in the Middle East dwindling in the very near future. This due mainly to their unwillingness to engage in any further acts of war in the region. Iran is well aware of this, and I see them exploiting this to their full advantage. Here's something else to consider. Certainly this shift in power is very bad news for Israel and will prove to embolden their enemies. When Russia, Iran, and the Islamic world come calling against Israel at the prophesied battle of Gog and Magog, it's very likely that the world oil prices will remain somewhat stable as long as the West, namely the United States, and Europe do not get involved. All biblical indications are they will not. At this time, I believe maintaining a stable world economy or the price of oil will be much more important than rescuing any ally in Israel. Iran is working hard at this time to bring about this scenario against Israel, and it might be sooner than any of us think. This is Terry Malone with the Calvary Prophecy Report.